Dr. Paul, I'm very happy that you came again. And before the festive season, which starts in a few weeks or maybe 10 days, we can talk this time about the site that you and your colleagues launched, and you can tell us more about postponed world conquest, the Mongols in the West, 1219, 1260, Rus, Central Europe, and Middle East.
Okay, thanks a lot
Yes. Please go ahead.
for the opportunity. So the website, I don't know if there's a way to maybe put it up on the screen, but it's postponed-world-conquest dot spbu.ru/en//. So yeah, if there's a way to maybe put it in the link of today's conversation, but this
I will.
website it just came up today. So it's a brand new release, and it was a project headed by Alexander Myrov at St. Petersburg State University, and closely associated with him was Fedor Sevolov and Veselov and a few other Russian colleagues who took part in translating and web design. And it's actually a deceptively important website because it contains three primary sources in both English and Russian and the Latin original side by side. And these three primary sources are the report of Friar Ricardus. Might not have heard of it, but it's important. Then we have the report of Friar Julian. And then finally, we have the report of Friar Simon of St. Quentin. And all three of these people were probably Dominican friars in the 1200s. And they write some of the earliest Western European reports about the Mongols. And not only are they early, but they're remarkably important documents on the Mongol Empire. And to be honest, it's quite amazing that they were not translated into English for the last 800 years. Latinists have been able to look at them, but they were never made available. And so they didn't really become part of the major discussions about the Mongol Empire. And there were even kind of misconceptions about these sources because probably most people weren't looking at them in detail. So, for instance, Friar Ricardus and Friar Julian, there was a lot of stories that they were just legends. These were just rumors that they were reporting about the Mongols. But when you read them in like a close way, you'll see that these are very well-informed documents about the rise of the Mongol Empire. They were both written in the 1230s, and Simon of St. Quentin personally met the Mongols, stayed among them for months in Armenia. So his report on them in the 1240s is also very useful. And now I hope these two documents, these are like really hard, serious translations with notes and whatnot, and I hope that they can now start to become more part of the discussion. When people use primary sources, they won't just use John of Plano Carpini and Marco Polo.
Yeah.
Now they can use John of Plano Carpini, Marco Polo, Julian, Ricardus, and Simon.
No, we added more primary sources for all kinds of researchers interested in Mongols, interested in realms that dealt with the Mongol Empire or kingdoms conquered by Mongol expansionist policies of 13th, 14th centuries. How difficult was to translate these documents, and how difficult is collaboration these days because of political situation?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Because
So this,
we both know that most of or many scholars who are specialized in Mongol Empire either live in Canada, States, Russia, Ukraine, Central Asia, and we know that the political situation in almost past 2 years is very difficult. So hopefully you collaborated normally with your colleagues from Russia and other parts of Eastern Europe.
as a preliminary to that, I was just talking to a well-known movie producer. He who wants to do a Mongol series. He made the movie Jim and Andy,
Okay.
classic documentary on Netflix. So about Jim Carrey and Andy Kaufman. But now he's making a Mongol documentary. And I was telling him about the countries that are really involved in the scholarship. I said like China,
Yeah.
Russia, Iran, and he said, "Oh, those are all the countries that the USA is enemies with." Like the former Mongol Empire is the enemy of the USA, and I'm like, yeah, that is. I never thought of that, but that is a strange thing. So modern politics have really they put an amazing obstacle in the way of this project. So 2021, things were going pretty well. The project had just been accepted, this 3-year project by the Russian Science Foundation. And the point of it was to foster closer cooperation between Russian scholars and Western and what have you. They want, in scholarship in general, they want an international collaboration. And so it was exciting, but already when this project was accepted, this postponed world conquest project was accepted by the Russian Science Foundation in early 2021. Several of the participants, including myself, already had health problems, probably from the lockdown and different things. So I was incapacitated for many months on the whole thing. I don't know what was happening with the others, but it was not good. And then by 2022, the situation had improved for me to actually contribute to this work. And then, of course, this horrible, tragic war broke out. Yeah, right at the start of 2022. And I just thought, I cannot see how, when
you just finished with one disaster and you entered another disaster, maybe worse or not worse, but now we're talking about 4 years since the beginning of COVID-19. And still we have cases of COVID and people get sick. And still we have some lunatics who claim that it's a seasonal virus, seasonal flu, no big deal. I mean, how many millions have to die before they realize that it's not a seasonal flu?
Yeah, it was it was like the curse, the ancient Chinese curse. I curse you to live in interesting times. I suddenly found myself in interesting times, trying to partner up with these Russians, and many of the international partners weren't allowed to continue in this whole thing. So, I mean, this was turning out like the Fifth Crusade. It was one fiasco after another, and but to their credit, the Russian Science Foundation just kept it going. My Russian colleagues kept it going. There was nothing political. Between us, there was no discussion. We talked about the politics of the 1200s. Exactly. That was our issue. And
it's a safe terrain.
The truth was, none of these guys had any say in what was the larger events that were happening. But it caused problems. Like once Russia's cut out of the SWIFT system, that changes everything. That really harmed my attempts to collaborate with them, which is unfortunate because they wanted to collaborate with me and I wanted to collaborate with them. So, but despite that, I got to give them credit that the Russian Science Foundation never gave up on the project. The partners in Russia just worked all the harder. Alexander Myarov and Fedor Veselov published a lot to keep it all going. And the crowning achievement for me, I didn't have many successes, but the big crowning achievement was this website that brings the first ever English translations of Friar Julian's report and Friar Ricardus, and a good, solid, reliable translation of Simon of St. Quentin. All of these are Dominican friars, which might not mean much now, but the significance of that in the 1200s was that these authors are part of the Dominican order, Mendicant order, and their project was to uh, uh, do missionary work amongst all the people of the world, no matter how dangerous they were. Mongols, so-called Saracens,
Of
Cumans,
course.
they were to go out there and, at the risk of martyrdom, start spreading the good the good news. And many of them did die, and they were sort of suicidally brave. Some of them explorers. So the story that these two reports tell on the website, the Friar Ricardus report and Friar Julian report, they're connected. They tell the story of Friar Julian going on expeditions, searching for the old homeland of the Hungarians, because the Hungarians in his time, they live in the Carpathian Basin in Europe, where Hungary is today. But they know that there's these old stories that they come from the Eastern Hungarians, who are somewhere out there in the unknown part of the world. And these Eastern Hungarians are still pagan. They didn't become Christian. Hungarians became Christian around the year 1000, but apparently they felt kind of sad that their co Hungarians were still living somewhere in the Volga River region and they weren't Christian. So these Dominicans were determined, the Hungarian Dominicans, to go exploring where in these totally unknown lands, foreign, dangerous countries, and find the old Hungarian kingdom. And Friar Julian, spoiler, but he does find the old Hungarians. And when he finally meets up with them, it's actually a kind of a funny story. He can suddenly speak Hungarian to
Mhm.
these people that have separated from the European Hungarians
Yeah.
for hundreds of years, and they can speak Hungarian back. And so he
So they
knows he's
spoke with the
found them.
same language or
Yeah,
very similar language. Yeah.
they still have the same language, and they were really the pagan Hungarians of what they call Magna Hungaria, old or Great Hungary.
Yeah.
They were really, really happy to have this guy come to from Europe and find them. And part of that was just probably how amazing it was that some guy had found them after all those years. But there's another reason that the people of Magna Hungaria were so happy, and that's because they were in a very dangerous situation. This was about the year 1235, 1235, 36. And the danger was Batu and the Mongols. They were mustering their army at that moment on the border of Magna Hungaria, and they had their emissary coming and threatening to destroy everyone. And Friar Julian happened to be there when the emissary of the Mongols shows up. Apparently, he spoke like 6, 7 languages. He spoke Hungarian, he spoke Mongolian, he spoke German. We even think we know who he is. He was an Englishman who somehow came into the Mongol service. But he spoke all these different languages, and he could speak to Julian. And he said, "Yep, we're coming. We're going to conquer the world. We're going to destroy these guys. We're going to destroy Russia. We're going to destroy Germany, and we're even coming for Rome." And so Friar Julian, who was just going to convert everyone to Christianity, hopefully, sees how dangerous this situation is in 1235. That there's this strange Tatar Mongol army just assembling on the border. So he goes rushing back to Rome and Hungary to warn everyone in Europe what's coming, and that these guys say they're coming for Rome. And so he gets to Rome, he tells the Pope, and there's a certain Friar Ricardus in Rome at the time. Here's this story, probably directly from Julian, and writes it all down. And that report luckily survives. So that's our first document. Friar Ricardus in 1236 records Julian's adventures in the East. But then the Pope sends Julian back to Magna Hungaria and he wants to. Basically, Julian's moved from being a missionary, a Dominican missionary. He's now a spy working on behalf of the Pope. He's got to find out what the heck is happening, because there's something very bizarre happening on the borders of Russia and whatnot. So Julian, probably knowing full well how dangerous this is, goes back in 1237, and he gets to Russia, and he gets stopped by the Russian prince of Vladimir Suzdal, Yuri, and Yuri the Second, I think. And he says, "You can't go farther east because all of that area's already been annihilated by the Mongols." So literally, he comes back a year later and finds out Magna Hungaria has been destroyed. But he'll even come across like refugees from Volga Bulgar and from Magna Hungaria, and they're just fleeing west, some of them to Europe. And he says, will you become Christian? And they're all saying, yeah, sure, anything. You want me to be? I don't know. I'm a Christian, whatever. But they're just fleeing for their lives. And so Julian, kind of naively, is like, oh, good, they're going to convert to Christianity. I got some good news. But meanwhile, the Mongol army is just ravaging. Now, this is the start of the Great Western Campaign. Subutai, Guyuk, Munka, all the greats are just steamrolling across Eastern Europe at this point. They completely annihilate Ryazan and Russia. And it so happened that Julian was in Ryazan in about October, November 1237. And the Duke of that place gives him a letter where it's the Mongol Khan threatening the Hungary with destruction. And he says, you better get this letter back to your homeland and tell them what's happening. So Julian leaves. 1 month later, early December, Ryazan is totally wiped out by the Mongols. So if Julian had have not left that city when he did, he would have been just another casualty of the fall of Ryazan, but he left literally a month or two before. So he starts heading back to Europe, the end of his second adventure, and things are getting really dangerous. And he said there's a war zone feeling in the air. There's bands of troops marching by. There's fortifications being made, and it was a country under war as he's leaving, and he's getting held up. You know, everything's dangerous. Everyone is stopping him, like, show your passport. But somehow he got back. He said it was a miracle. He gets back to Hungary. He said, okay, so the news is even worse. Before, the Mongols were just threatening to destroy everyone. Now they're actually doing it. And so he was warning all the people like the Pope, like, we need to come up with some major defense strategy, because already the Mongols have encircled Russia. This was late 1237. And we know that they did annihilate most of the Rus cities in like one winter, 1237-38. And then, of course, in 1241, they did come to Hungary, and they did devastate it. And Julian had been an early warning. But unfortunately, he wasn't taken as seriously as he should have been. That doesn't mean he wasn't taken seriously. In fact, there were a lot of people who copied his letter because it was so alarming. He was telling about the Mongol Empire and how it works and who the Khan is and how it started. And some people copied his letter down. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's made it to our time. Again, it's kind of lucky that document survived, but part of the reason it survived is because the information in it was so horrifying that the warnings started to spread through Europe. So people would copy Julian's letter and record it and say, just so you know, there's this strange thing happening. So sadly, the Hungarian king, and he was often criticized for this, he didn't take the situation seriously enough, and he didn't do adequate preparations. I don't know what he could have done, but Hungary was devastated in 1241-42. And so we have the third document, which is Simon of St. Quentin. Again, he's Dominican. He's a Dominican friar, and he takes part in a mission that's sent by the Pope to just go and find the nearest Mongol army they can find. So they leave from the Holy Land, from Acre, and they just go kind of wandering up to Armenia, and they find the huge Mongol army there under Baiju Noyan. It's the one who conquered Turkey.
Yeah.
And they have letters from the Pope demanding the Mongols stop killing people. And they have it's almost comical how bad their diplomatic mission goes with the Mongols. They just immediately offend the Mongols.
Of
The
course.
Mongols threaten to execute.
To the
They said
suicidal
they
mission.
didn't.
To the suicidal mission and suicidal approach.
It really does seem like a suicide mission. Like these guys were determined to die in a way. And they even said it. They said, let's just get our heads chopped off. They say in the book, I'm not going to spoil the story for anyone who wants to read it, but it's very suspenseful because they offend the Mongols so badly right away. And the thing they said that really offended them was they said, we've never heard of Baiju or Batu or Goya Khan. We don't know who the hell you are. We just heard that there's some barbarian people that's killing everyone. And we're here to tell you to stop killing everybody. And the Mongols just go ballistic when they hear that. They're like, and then the Mongols say, "Did you bring us any presents?" Because that's a very important part of their diplomacy. And the French diplomats say, "Nope, we didn't bring you any presents. People normally send the Pope presents. We don't give you presents." And again, the Mongols are just like, these guys are suicidal. So it's a very eye-opening story about diplomacy in the age of the Mongol Empire and how not to do it.
Of course. Regarding the
So,
website, are you planning to? Of course, you're probably planning to expand this website. We're talking about the initial shape of the website, which you
well,
uploaded today. Yeah.
technically the project's over now, but hopefully it gets extended, which can happen with these things. And if I'm included, I hope to develop it further. We have an interactive map right now. That's part of it though. And this is a really cool feature because it lets when you're reading about ancient history or medieval history, there's so many place names and they just don't mean anything.
Yeah.
You can't visualize where they are. But with this map, you're able to just there's Wikipedia articles attached. So if you click on a place, you can learn more on Wikipedia. You can see its exact place in the documents, and you can visualize it all on a satellite map. Not just some sketch of the. It's an actual satellite map, and you can see where all these places were, and it really helps to make sense of it. So things like that, I would like to, see more often. Maybe we could add even additional sources to it, and then you know update the interactive map with more locations. And so, but for now, yeah, it's a nice, tidy, simple website that provides reliable translations of three primary sources that have heretofore just not really received much attention.
And it's in both English and Russian and
Yes,
Latin
in
and
English.
Latin. If you're talking about the primary sources.
Yes, so that's another thing that's with cooperation being difficult with Russia and the West, there's a lot of things happening now politically.
Of
But
course.
in scholarship, you shouldn't stop cooperation, I think, and it's important to keep those ties together and to keep cooperating with colleagues all over the world. And so to me, this is a really great achievement that despite all the reasons that this website could have not worked out, it did. And it provides something valuable and something that you can't find anywhere else. So, but I should tell you, speaking of like expanding things, simultaneously, I worked with colleagues in Hungary and Finland to make a volume that is the actual like state of the art translations of these documents and many others. Like Jan Długosz is included, his account of the Mongol invasion of Poland. We have a rabbi his testimony of a prisoner, a Mongol prisoner in 1241's interrogation. We have the letters of King Václav of Bohemia, Frederick II, Hohenstaufen, the King of Hungary, King Conrad of Germany, as they're communicating in 1241 about the Mongols.
Yeah, you have the whole correspondence between different rulers of that time.
Yes, and these have never appeared in English, and they are absolutely eye-opening documents.
So it's a milestone in a way.
Yeah, and that book is coming out in 2024. It's published by Central European University Press, and it's part of their Central European Medieval Text series, so CEMT series. These sort of brown books, they're quite important and popular, and this will be the next installment of those. And these, so Roman Hautala was involved in this, a scholar from Finland, and he really went overboard. He looked at every manuscript, corrected every Latin error. You know, it's totally comprehensive, state of the art. So it's not, the translations can be a little bit different from what I have here on this website, because they incorporate absolutely every, you know, manuscript, every edition. And so that's really like the critical edition of these three documents and many, many more. And it really, if you finish reading that book, you'll feel like you were almost there in the Mongol invasions, because it's these are such important eyewitness sources that just have never been available in English. And so that's going to be coming out in 2024, and we can talk about that if you want when it,
we will
when
talk
it comes out.
When time comes and when everything is finalized, we can discuss that as well. What are your plans also for 2024 besides these projects?
I actually don't really
We're
know.
talking about New Year resolutions.
I have a dissertation that my former supervisors want to turn into a book, and it's about the Mongol invasions of Europe and why the Mongols withdrew. So hopefully I'll write that, and we can talk about that too someday, and I can send you a copy of it. But I'll tell you just one thing I found in that book that is amazing. I found a conversation that took place in East Asia between Kublai Khan and an old general. And the general was describing that there was a debate in the Mongol army in 1259 about whether or not to attack this small, strong Chinese fortress. The Song Chinese were fighting the Mongols at the time. And people like him, the general said, I was against attacking this fortress. I said, let's not do this. And the other Mongols generals said, we have to take out the small fortresses. It's our military doctrine as Mongols. We have to do this, because if you don't own even the little fortresses, you don't actually control the country. And so we attacked the fortress, and your brother died there. Munka Khan died at the fortress. And Kublai Khan allegedly, in the story, it says he beat his chest and he said, if only they'd listen to you, like, if only they'd follow. But it goes to show you that the Mongols had a doctrine, a military doctrine, that you can't leave little fortresses around. And that's the argument of my dissertation, that all these little fortresses in Europe on hilltops, there were so many of them, that this was worried the Mongols, that this was one of their really serious strategic concerns.
Because they changed, they learned from the first campaign, and they strengthened their defense after the first round of pillaging and the first wave of Mongol assault in Eastern and Central Europe. This is why they should have listened to Dominican monks who warned them about the potential attack and prepare defense and prepare defensive lines and fortresses.
It's a very cautionary story. The Dominicans came back and warned everyone in Europe But when the Mongols didn't appear after a year or so, everyone started to treat it like a joke.
Yeah.
This is what one Hungarian said. He goes, everyone just thought it was a joke. They're making fun of it. Like, oh, the Tatars are coming.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, and this is another thing that kind of reminds me of modern times. All these refugees were fleeing the Mongols, like especially the Kuman Kipchaks.
Yes.
And they were invited into Hungary by the king. And he said, well, you convert to Christianity? And they said, you bet. And they all
Yeah.
got baptized right away. But but they weren't welcome by the ordinary people of Hungary because these Kumans would just march around. They were nomads and they would trample people's farm fields and destroy all their crops. And so the people would go and complain like, "What is the king doing? He's letting these savages in here and they're just destroying everything." And the king didn't want to offend the Kuman Kipchaks because he's seen them as potential allies against the Mongols. So he's really treating them with kid gloves, as they say.
Yeah.
And that's just enraging his own people against the king because they're like, look, these foreigners just came in here and he treats the foreigners better than he treats us.
Yeah.
And so,
Domestic subjects.
yeah, and so when the Mongols invaded, the domestic subjects weren't really on the side of the king anymore because they hated him so much for his Kuman friendly policies. And so it even said people were not showing up when he summoned the army. They were just because they didn't want to help him. And then he, of course, got his army got devastated at the Battle of Muhi. His brother was mortally wounded. He fled as a refugee out of the country. And so, and there were some people who were even happy about his downfall because he had alienated them so much by his favoritism towards the Kumans who were allegedly, damaging crops, and it just goes to show you that, like these sort of social tensions where local people of a country feel like they're not treated as well as newcomers, and it turns them against the government. That can have really terrible consequences in a time of crisis. And as we saw in 1241, because suddenly the local people see the king of their own country as their adversary
Yeah.
and don't realize how serious this danger the Mongols posed was. But, and then suddenly the Mongols are trying to kill them. And they realize, oh, maybe I should have actually helped the king after all. But it's kind of a weird story about that teaches you about or reminds you of sort of tensions in our own time that you're always reading about on the news, and of people feeling that they're not
Neglected.
listened. Yeah, that they're neglected by their own government, and that resentment in 1241 had very, very, very serious consequences in Hungary.
If you want to add something additional, please go ahead.
Just I advise everyone read this website. These documents are short, to the point. The English, the Russian, the Latin, any language you choose to read it in, and yeah, definitely. If you're writing on the Mongols or doing research on them, these three sources are invaluable. I don't know how they weren't translated before now. And as well, keep in mind that critical editions of them are coming out in 2024 in
Yeah.
a book volume by Central European University Press.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing that book, and I'm looking forward to talking with you about new projects in 2024. I bet we're going to talk before the book is on.
I hope so.
Because yeah, we will. Because I have some plans for maybe January. I'm not going to bother you in December because you might be busy with the family and with the festive season. But I'll definitely come back to you in maybe early January. We can coordinate.
Awesome. Okay. And in that case, I'll wish you a happy new year and best of luck.
Of
And
course.
Yeah, I really hope 2024 is a little bit brighter than the last few.
I mean,
No more interesting
2023
things.
wasn't that bad. I can't complain. On the contrary, my position was very good in 2020, 2021. Each year has been better than the previous so far in, let's say, last 10, 11 years. And I hope that the trend is going to continue in 2024. We had some setbacks, like already mentioned, pandemic. It limits research of people who I normally follow and with whom I normally talk. But generally, 2023 was definitely much better than 2020 or 2021. So
Yes,
let's hope for the best and let's work for the best. We have to be active.
indeed.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
God bless.
Bye.
Bye.